Let me tell you about a country you've never thought about. It has no oil, no massive mineral deposits, no Amazon rainforest, no strategic canal. It's sandwiched between two giant neighbors who could sneeze and knock it over. It's smaller than Oklahoma. Its population is 3.5 million, roughly the size of Connecticut. Its most famous export is beef. Its second most famous export is soccer players. And yet, Uruguay has the highest GDP per capita in Latin America, the lowest corruption levels, the strongest democracy, the most stable institutions, the best education outcomes, the lowest poverty rate. While Argentina lurches from crisis to crisis and Brazil stumbles through political chaos, Uruguay just works. How? How does a tiny country with no natural advantages outperform its resource-rich neighbors? The answer isn't one thing. It's a series of choices made over more than a century. Boring choices, unsexy policies. The kind of reforms that don't make headlines because they don't involve revolutions or crises. This is the story of Latin America's quiet winner. The country that proves you don't need oil, size, or luck to succeed. You just need to do the basics right, consistently, for a very long time. 1. The numbers don't lie. Before we explore how, let's establish that Uruguay actually is exceptional. GDP per capita, approximately $22,000. That's higher than Chile, Argentina, Brazil, or Mexico. It's approaching Portuguese levels. Poverty rate, around 10%, the lowest in Latin America. Compare that to Colombia at 36% or Mexico at 43%. Inequality. Uruguay's Gini coefficient is 0.4, still not great by European standards, but far better than Brazil's 0.53 or Colombia's 0.54. Corruption Perceptions Index. Uruguay ranks 14th globally, ahead of the United States. It's the only Latin American country in the top 25. Democracy Index. Uruguay scores 8.9, 1 out of 10, classified as a full democracy. It's the highest in Latin America and ranks above France, Belgium, and the United States. Human Development Index, 0.83, very high human development, first in Latin America. Press Freedom Index, first in Latin America, among the top 20 globally. These aren't cherry-picked statistics. Every major international index that measures governance, development, or quality of life puts Uruguay at or near the top for the region. Something is working here. Let's find out what. 2. The Battle Revolution. The foundations. Uruguay's success story begins with a name most people outside the country have never heard. José Batlle in Ordóñez. Batlle was president twice, from 1903 to 1907 and 1911 to 1915. But his influence extended far beyond his terms. He created the template for modern Uruguay. What did Batlle do? He built Latin America's first welfare state. Public pensions, accident insurance, unemployment benefits, Uruguay had these decades before most of Europe. The 8-hour workday became law in 1915. He invested massively in public education. Uruguay achieved near universal literacy by the 1922nd, generations ahead of its neighbors. Education was free, secular, and compulsory. He separated church and state more thoroughly than almost any country in the hemisphere. Uruguay was officially secularized in 1917. This prevented the religious conflicts that plagued other Latin American nations. He created state enterprises in key sectors: electricity, telecommunications, insurance, banking. The government provided services that private monopolies might have exploited. These weren't Soviet-style nationalizations, but pragmatic tools for development. He reformed the political system to prevent dictatorship. Uruguay experimented with collective executive councils, trying to prevent the concentration of power that enabled authoritarianism elsewhere. Most importantly, Batlle established a political culture that valued consensus over confrontation. The two major parties, Colorados and Blancos, developed traditions of power sharing and compromise that persist today. This happened over a century ago, but the foundations matter. Uruguay entered the 20th century with institutions, literacy, and political norms that most Latin American countries wouldn't develop for generations. 3. The size advantage. Uruguay's smallness, usually seen as a weakness, is actually part of its success. Here's why. In a country of 3.5 million, everyone knows everyone. The political class, the business elite, the intellectual community, they all interact. They went to the same universities. Their kids go to the same schools. They see each other at the same restaurants. This creates accountability that's hard to achieve in larger countries. A corrupt minister in Brazil can hide among 200 million people. A corrupt minister in Uruguay runs into his victims at the supermarket. The social pressure for decent behavior is constant. Smallness also makes policy implementation easier. There's one major city, Montevideo, which holds half the population. National programs don't need to navigate vast distances or regional variations. What works in the capital works in the country. The bureaucracy is more manageable. Uruguay has roughly 300,000 public employees. That's a lot for a small country, but it's a system where problems can be identified and addressed. Brazil has over 11 million public employees across federal, state, and municipal levels. Coordination is nearly impossible. Small countries can also change direction faster. When policies fail, the feedback is immediate. When reforms succeed, they can scale quickly. Uruguay has pivoted multiple times, from agricultural export economy to welfare state to modern service economy, without the inertia that traps larger nations. 4. The political miracle. Here's something remarkable. Uruguay's three major political parties have alternated in power peacefully for decades. The Colorados dominated the early 20th century. The Blancos, now Partido Nacional, competed throughout. In 2004, the Frente Amplio, a leftist coalition, won the presidency for the first time. They governed for 15 years. In 2019, power transferred back to a center-right coalition. In 2024, the Frente Amplio won again. Each transition was smooth. No coups, no constitutional crises, no accusations of stolen elections. This seems unremarkable until you compare it to the region. Argentina, regular economic crises, military coups, Peronist versus anti-Peronist wars. Brazil, impeachments, a president in jail, another threatening not to leave office. Venezuela, democratic collapse into authoritarianism. Peru, 6 presidents in 5 years, constant constitutional chaos. Uruguay just transfers power, left to right, right to left. The institutions hold, the rules are followed. How? Part of it is the Batley legacy of consensus building. Part of it is the electoral system, which uses proportional representation and prevents winner-take-all dynamics. But mostly it's culture. Uruguayan politicians, for all their disagreements, share a commitment to democratic norms that their counterparts elsewhere don't. The left didn't try to perpetuate itself in power. The right accepted leftist victories. Everyone plays by the rules because everyone expects everyone else to play by the rules. This isn't automatic. It's maintained through constant reinforcement. When a politician crosses a line, they face consequences. When institutions are threatened, voices across the spectrum defend them. Democracy is a habit. Uruguay has been practicing it longer than almost anyone in Latin America. 5. The commodity curse avoided. Uruguay exports beef, soybeans, rice, and dairy. It's fundamentally an agricultural economy. Other commodity-dependent countries fall into traps. They get addicted to export revenue, they neglect other sectors. When prices crash, they crash. Uruguay avoided this. How? First, they never had the windfall curse. Unlike Venezuela with oil or Chile with copper, Uruguay's agricultural exports are valuable but not spectacular. There was never enough money to fund decades of mismanagement. The government always had to be careful. Second, they diversified early. Batlay's industrialization push created manufacturing capacity. Later, governments developed services, particularly software and technology. Today, Uruguay exports over $2 billion in services annually, including software development and business process outsourcing. Third, they invested commodity revenues wisely. When soybean prices boomed in the 2000s, Uruguay didn't go on a spending spree. They reduced debt, built reserves, and maintained fiscal discipline. When prices fell, they had a cushion. Fourth, they developed their own processing capacity. Uruguay doesn't just export raw beef, it exports premium processed meat products. It doesn't just grow rice, it mills it domestically. Value capture happens at home. The result is an economy that's exposed to commodity cycles but not dependent on them. When beef prices fall, it hurts, but it doesn't collapse the government or trigger a currency crisis. 6. The education obsession. Uruguay's commitment to education is almost religious. Free public education from kindergarten through university. It's been this way for over a century. José Pedro Varela, a 19th century reformer, established the system that Batley expanded. The results show. Literacy rate 99%, highest in Latin America. Mean years of schooling 8.7 years, among the highest in the region. PISA scores. Not stellar by global standards, but consistently the best or among the best in Latin America. Tertiary enrollment. Over 60% of young people pursue higher education. But it's not just access, it's also quality and equity. Uruguay's public schools are genuinely universal. Rich kids and poor kids attend the same primary schools. This creates social cohesion that segregated education systems destroy. The Universidad de la República, the public university, is free and open to anyone who completes secondary school. The elite don't segregate themselves in private universities because the public option is legitimate. This educational foundation creates human capital that drives everything else. Uruguay can develop a software industry because it has educated workers. It can maintain democratic institutions because citizens can read and think critically. It can resist populist demagogues because the population is hard to fool. 7. The tax system that works. Uruguay has high taxes by Latin American standards, and people actually pay them. The tax to GDP ratio is around 27%, higher than any other country in the region. Brazil is around 32%, but that's misleading given Brazil's enormous informal economy and collection inefficiency. Uruguay collects taxes effectively because the system is relatively simple. Compared to Brazil's nightmarish complexity, Uruguay's tax code is comprehensible. Compliance is easier when people understand what they owe. Enforcement is real. Tax evasion is prosecuted. The revenue service has capacity and political backing. Evaders face consequences. The social contract is visible. Uruguayans see what their taxes buy: roads, schools, healthcare, pensions. The connection between payment and benefit is clear. This builds willingness to pay. Informality is lower. While informal employment exists, Uruguay has among the lowest rates in Latin America. Most workers are in the formal sector, contributing to social security and paying income tax. The result is a government that has resources. Uruguay can fund its welfare state without printing money or accumulating unsustainable debt. When crises hit, there's fiscal capacity to respond. 8. The welfare state that didn't bankrupt the country. Uruguay has extensive social programs: public pensions, healthcare, family allowances, unemployment insurance. This sounds like a recipe for fiscal disaster. In many countries, it is. Generous promises, inadequate funding, eventual collapse. Uruguay made it work through careful design. The pension system is contributory. Benefits are tied to contributions. You get more out if you put more in. This creates incentives for formal employment and prevents the unfunded liability explosions that plague other countries. Healthcare is mixed. A public system covers everyone, but a parallel private system, the mutualistas, provides additional options. This reduces pressure on the public system while maintaining universal coverage. Social programs are targeted. Uruguay uses sophisticated means testing to direct benefits to those who need them. The Bolsa Familia model that Brazil made famous was partly inspired by Uruguayan programs. Fiscal rules constrain expansion. Uruguay has informal but real limits on deficit spending. When governments expand programs, they typically find offsetting revenues. The result is a welfare state that provides genuine security without bankrupting the treasury. Life expectancy is 78 years, highest in Latin America. Infant mortality is among the lowest. Poverty in old age is rare because pensions actually work. 9. The boring competence. Here's what's unsexy about Uruguay. It's run competently. The bureaucracy functions. Not brilliantly, not without frustration, but it functions. When you need a permit, you can get one in a reasonable time frame. When you interact with government, the experience is tolerable. The courts work. Justice is slow, as it is everywhere, but it's real. Contracts are enforced. Property rights are respected. Corruption in the judiciary is rare. The central bank is independent. Monetary policy is technical, not political. Inflation has been controlled for years. The peso fluctuates, but doesn't collapse. Regulatory agencies do their jobs. The electricity works, the water is clean, the food supply is safe. These basics, which can't be taken for granted in much of Latin America, function in Uruguay. This competence isn't heroic. No one writes songs about reliable building permits, but it compounds over time. Every year that the system works, trust increases. Every contract enforced makes the next contract more likely. Every clean transaction builds a reputation that attracts more transactions. The mundane machinery of government is Uruguay's competitive advantage. It's not exciting, but it's rare. 10. The innovation culture. Despite its traditional economy, Uruguay has embraced innovation in ways that belie its sleepy image. The Plan Cybele, launched in 2007, gave every public school student and teacher a laptop. Uruguay was the first country in the world to achieve one laptop per child nationally. The program wasn't just hardware distribution, it included teacher training, curriculum development, and connectivity infrastructure. Today, Uruguayan students grow up digitally literate by default. Uruguay legalized marijuana in 2013, the first country to fully legalize recreational cannabis at the national level. The motivation wasn't libertarianism, but pragmatism. Regulation beats prohibition for reducing harm. The implementation has been careful. State-controlled production, pharmacy distribution, residency requirements. It's not a free-for-all, but a regulated market designed to undercut illegal trade. Uruguay legalized same-sex marriage in 2013, abortion in 2012, and has consistently led Latin America on social liberalism. These aren't distractions from development. They're markers of a society that can change and adapt. The common thread is pragmatic experimentation. Uruguay tries things. When they work, they expand. When they don't, they adjust. There's no rigid ideology preventing evolution. 11. The neighborhood effect. Uruguay benefits from being boring compared to its neighbors. When Argentina's economy collapses, capital flees to Uruguay. Argentine depositors have long kept savings in Montevideo banks. When Buenos Aires is chaotic, money moves across the river. When Brazil has political crises, investors look for stable alternatives. Uruguay, with its investment-grade credit rating and functional institutions, is an obvious destination. This isn't parasitism, it's comparative advantage. Uruguay can't compete with Argentina's agricultural scale or Brazil's industrial base, but it can offer stability that neither can match. The country has positioned itself as a regional hub for services, banking, logistics, software development, activities that benefit from reliability gravitate to Uruguay. Tourism follows the same pattern. Punta del Este is the beach destination for wealthy Argentines and Brazilians. They come because it's safe, clean, and functional in ways their own beach towns often aren't. Regional instability is unfortunate for everyone, but Uruguay has managed to benefit from it while maintaining good relations with its neighbors. No one resents Uruguay. It's too small to threaten anyone. 12. The lessons for everyone. What can other countries learn from Uruguay? Institutions matter more than resources. Uruguay has no oil, no massive mineral wealth, no geographic advantages beyond nice farmland. It built prosperity through human and institutional capital. Countries that focus only on exploiting resources miss the point. Consistency beats brilliance. Uruguay never had a revolutionary transformation or a visionary leader who changed everything overnight. It had generations of reasonably competent management. Compound interest on good governance creates more value than occasional heroics. Political culture is real. The hardest thing to replicate is Uruguay's consensus-oriented politics. But it shows that Latin America isn't culturally destined for polarization and populism. Other paths are possible. Small can be beautiful. Size isn't destiny. A small country that gets things right can outperform giants that get things wrong. The key is using smallness as an advantage for accountability and adaptability. Boring is underrated. The most important policies aren't dramatic. They're the mundane systems that collect taxes, educate children, enforce contracts, and provide basic services. Getting these right matters more than grand projects. Conclusion. The quiet winner. Uruguay will never dominate headlines. It won't produce a charismatic leader who promises to transform everything. It won't have a spectacular boom that attracts global attention. It won't collapse in a crisis that demands emergency intervention. It will just keep quietly succeeding. The children will go to school. The businesses will pay their taxes. The government will change hands peacefully. The lights will stay on. The courts will function. Life will improve, gradually, consistently, year after year. In a region of drama, Uruguay chooses boring. In a region of conflict, Uruguay chooses consensus. In a region of booms and busts, Uruguay chooses stability. It's not the most exciting model, but it works. And in a world where so many countries with so many more advantages fail so spectacularly, maybe the most radical thing Uruguay does is prove that success isn't about luck or resources or size. It's about choices, made consistently, over a long time. The quiet winner doesn't need applause, it just needs to keep winning. If this made you see a country you'd never thought about in a new light, hit that subscribe button, because sometimes the best lessons come from the places nobody's watching. See you in the comments, and remember, economics isn't always about the dramatic stories. Sometimes the real story is the country that just keeps getting it right.